Hey, it's Gary.
Perfect. Okay, we're gonna give everyone about 2 to 3 minutes to pop in, and then we'll start up. You guys, in the meantime, want to go ahead and post where you're coming from and where you're at. That would be awesome because we'd like to know where everyone's coming in from.
Sure. Chicago.
Yo.
Didn't Texas. I thought I recognized some people in here. I was like, oh, those are Texas people.
Awesome.
Des Moines, Iowa. Lovely place. Feels so weird. It's like going on like a year. I have not flown anywhere. I haven't been in an airport. Getting hives from that.
I don't know if I'd want to fly after this. The idea of being cooped in a small tube with other people after being cooped up for a year.
I've worked in the fitness industry like since 2012 in big box gyms. I've always known that human beings are disgusting. So it was funny. It was a moment like me, like still working out at a gym, like before like quarantine and stuff. I saw a woman like take like the disinfecting wipes and wipe down the handles of some dumbbells, and I'm like, my mind was blown. I'm like, I've been working out in gyms like since 2000, since like 2004. I'd never thought to do that, which is brilliant. Now I do that now. Wipe off like dumbbell handles because people don't wash their hands.
It's a big reason I do not, especially during the pandemic when things opened back up here. I initially was like, oh, okay, my gym's actually giving some good guidelines, and it's like went in, no one was following anything. It was like, and here's my submission to end my membership entirely.
Yeah, Stephanie. Yeah, they do say that. My thing is like being someone like who flies a lot, especially around the holidays. You have amateur hour, and then you have the people just like not doing things properly in security lines, and then it's like
talk about racism in dance.
Not yet. We're kind of waiting until people get here.
And we have people still coming in.
Talk about
Okay, so Shelby, I think we can go ahead and safely say we could probably start. So what we'll probably do is just start with some introductions and let Shelby tell you guys a little bit about himself and who he is as a human and how he got to start in swing dancing.
Yes. Hello. Hello, y'all. I'm Shelby Johnson. I was born in Columbus, Ohio. I live currently in Dallas, Texas. I have been dancing for 10 years. I started dancing Lindy Hop in February of 2011 with the University of Central Florida Swing Nights. In 2013, I moved to Dallas, Texas, where I've been ever since. I started swing dancing while in grad school, pursuing a master's degree in sports fitness, sport leadership, and coaching. And I got into it because a friend of mine who's like a competition ballroom dancer, like took us all to a dance, and he was like really into it. And but like I was the only one who consistently stayed with it. And so before moving to Dallas, I started DJing and DJed at a variety of exchanges in not only just Florida, but also in Georgia and South Carolina. And that was pretty much it. And then moved to Texas where now like I've DJed in for Beantown Dance Camp. I DJed at Camp Jitterbug in Seattle, Washington. Well, no, I was scheduled to DJ, and then that gig got canceled. Never mind. I haven't DJed at, but I've taught at Camp Jitterbug. I've taught in many places around the country, and now mostly I just lecture. Now that we're in the pandemic, talking about uh, black black dance history and black cultural aspects of dance. I think this is going to be probably where I hit on like a bunch of different topics like music, social customs, different ways like how a lot of these dance traditions are still alive today and just manifest in different ways and different things. So we had a variety of questions. And I'm probably going to get into the first one that we had was if that was asked is like if Lindy Hop or vernacular jazz was predominantly African American dance, then why does it seem to so whitewashed now? And how can we be better allies for Black dancers and the Black dance community? The thing is, Lindy Hop and vernacular jazz dance is still an African American dance or a Black American dance. I use Black American because that encapsulates all people of the African diaspora. Like Norma Miller's family actually comes from the Bahamas. So Norma Miller is a Black American. She's not necessarily African American. So I try to use Black American dance because a lot of dance and music genres that are heavily influenced for Black culture actually come from Jamaica. They come from like people from the Bahamas and things like that. So it's still those dances. The reason why it's so whitewashed now is basically because America is going to America. A lot of aspects, especially with jazz dance, even going back like to like the pre-1900s, especially when like minstrel shows were a big deal. A lot of dances were copied from slaves by white dancers, and they would put on blackface and then perform them in vaudeville shows and in minstrel shows. And that's just been a thing, like usually something that starts in Black cultural settings, then gets mainstream acclaim, and then is then taken or appropriated to fit the more mainstream sensitivities. So as a lot of dance forms came up in like a lot of jazz dance forms came up in Black communities, and then you had you had Black dancers featured in film. But after like 1936, like you would see more presentations in the mainstream of white dancers, and that happens with a lot of dance art forms. I mean, it's kind of you're kind of seeing it with hip hop now. Like with TikTok videos, you see they go viral like with white dancers doing them, but it came from a Black, and most likely came from a Black setting. They saw a video, and then due to racist algorithms that intentionally prefer like white content creators, they're able to get more exposure to get that. And I mean, that's happened in film where it's like you have Black performers, but due to racism, like in the South, like a lot of dance numbers got cut from films in the South. And then so a lot more as Lindy Hop became a bigger phenomenon for mainstream culture and being called jitterbug, you saw a lot more white dancers being used in film. And that would get widespread acclaim rather tn the Black dancers in and of themselves. Like I think like a question someone talked about referring to B. Jackson with regarding Charleston Herb being very famous with a lot of with that dance was made famous by a group of dancers in Running Wild. Like that musical, the Charleston really became a global phenomenon off that. Josephine Baker was very famous for doing Charleston, but like her acclaim, she was very famous over in France. She didn't really get much fame in the United States, and was still, even though she was like a world-renowned performer, even coming back to the United States, she was still discriminated against. So an aspect of why like Lindy Hop in vernacular jazz is whitewashed now is just simply America's American mainstream culture having the propensity to erase the Black influence of a lot of art forms than to make it suitable and reframing it to be suitable to a mainstream audience. Because like a lot of things have been reframed to fit or to be more consumable from a mainstream sense. So
Yeah, I like how this person pretty much like included the idea of like, so how can we make it better? Like, how can they be better allies to make sure Black dancers actually feel that they're a part of stuff and within this dance?
Yeah, and I think to the historical piece, like to make a lot of Black dancers that I know of, like the thing, a lot of them they know the connection because a lot of them had grandparents who danced. I mean, I had grandparents who danced. They danced jitterbug with Jesse Owens at Ohio State University, like the very famous track athlete. Like he was apparently really good at the jitterbug, and my grandmother like danced with them. So a lot of people have some connection to someone who did dance, like when the dance was originally around. And I think acknowledging a lot of them, a lot of those dancers were very miffed when that history isn't recognized or acknowledged. So I think a big way to be better allies for Black dancers in the community is to acknowledge the roots of the dance and acknowledge and be aware of how the dance has been reframed to a mainstream for a mainstream audience to be massively consumed. Like, so when I teach drop-in lessons, since a lot of people in the Dallas Fort Worth Metroplex, their first exposure to partner dancing is ballroom. I explain how I teach from an African American perspective and explain how Arthur Murray's involvement with an impact on the American ballroom like tradition kind of plays into how Lindy Hop kind of gets mischaracterized and gets shown to be something that is not and being stripped of a lot of it because I think I was talking about in a meme group and like that
the Arthur Murray East Coast Swing one. I saw.
Yeah, like literally on their website. They changed it since then, but when I was researching for another topic to talk about like a difference between like Black vernacular dance and like kind of like ballroom, is that like they really stated that East Coast swing is a tamed version of Lindy Hop, and I'm like, that's some very coded racism because like a lot of times like black people were very characterized as being like less than human, being barbaric or animalistic. So to tame something is to make it more dignified. Is how I interpret that double speak, and to see something like that still on their website like in 2020 was kind of like was very jarring. I think they've changed that, fortunately, but still it doesn't take for the fact that like Arthur Murray stole a lot of dance forms and repackaged them to make money off of, while like you have many Black dancers who originated the dance and they didn't get a cent because one, there's no venues that would probably hire them to teach anyway, no matter regardless of how many Harvest Moon ball contests they won. So
do you feel like the ballroom community currently still has similar issues?
I have there are race issues with it because I think someone shared an article. I know a couple Black competition ballroom dancers, and they shared articles talking about how like I think a person waltz would get deducted for having just for like slight interpretations from like in the dance, and how like everything's very sterile and sameness, but how his body's built, the fact that he defiantly dances with an afro like when he competes, it's just so bucking the trends and the traditions of the aesthetic of ballroom dance, which is very Eurocentric. Like he talks about how a lot of scores get impacted, and so it's still issues in the ballroom scene. I don't know the ins and outs of them because, like I mean, foxtrot's not fun. American tango's not fun to me, so I don't participate in those dances. And so, but yeah, like yeah, there's issues with that, and that kind of goes into other dance forms as well, where it comes to like a preference to a more to like aesthetics and historical like knowledge of a dance.
Yeah, I mean that could easily tie into the Lindy Hop culture now too, with the obsession with vintage wear and consistently trying to idolize a culture that not entirely utilizing the social aspects of it at the time frame as well, and why it could be destructive.
Yeah, it can be destructive because, like, yeah, everything's from and like one thing I talk about a lot when I talk, like, generally on Facebook or in discussions is our cultural lenses. And a lot of, and this kind of goes into a question I think someone had. It's like, do white dancers harm black dancers currently? And like, not maliciously. What I mean maliciously is having an attempt to cause harm. A lot of harm that a lot of black, indigenous, and people of color, like like BIPOCs, um, express is a lot of stuff it's unintentional, but it's also things they kind of push like the Eurocentric norms onto things, and then also push that onto dance. So like the vintage fashion, like I talked to Laura Windley about this, like talking about how I felt like black fashion is kind of different, but it's not really documented, and I have to try and dig really hard to see what was the black fashion of the day. But also at the same time, it's going to be kind of um, juggle because the concept of respectability politics, like in Frankie Manning talks about this in his book regarding, like, I think he refers to it with the Congaroos. He didn't really talk about it with Whitey's Lindy Hoppers, but I'm sure it was the same concern. They made sure to be very well dressed and have very good looking costumes to earn respect. And that was the thing in the black community, is to be dressed in a way to be respected. So they always made sure they had like well trimmed suits. And I think a lot of the fashion differences would come to how things were worn, depending on the setting. So
Okay. Yeah, I definitely. So, when talking about how the dance community could still may be causing harm to specifically Black dancers, how can we actively work on addressing that harm currently?
addressing that harm, I think just being able to hold I'm gonna go back. I think like holding conversations would be also, but I think rethinking um, safe space policies. Like one thing I'm like really active in safe space groups is discussing our safe space policies written to address racism, like racism and like especially overt racism. A lot of safety, because and like a lot of safe space policies mostly are only talked about to discuss sexual assault.
For white
And yeah, and even that is like it's mainly for white cis women. So a lot of times issues even within that small realm is those issues are going to come across different when a black male is involved. There's a black male, like a black man and a white woman, like that heteronormative, because there's a lot of like historical weight of white women falsely accusing black men of different things, and then also being able to take into account just black social norms are different from white social norms, and things can get just have weight. So being able to have um, more people to interject in the conversations of safety, and also having just policies in place to deal with like to deal with race issues of racism low, so that way if something does happen, that black people and people of color have a space to address those issues. And like a lot of stuff we're going to talk about, it's loaded, but that's like one thing. But also it's just being able to have conversations with people like there's a lot of dancers, black dancers who do a lot of different things. Like Kenneth Ship does this thing called Talk to Me on Sundays every now and again, where he talks about pressing issues with the black communities. Damon Stone does many talks on black culture and things like that. You have Latasha Barnes. I think like one way is to just try to expand your cultural worldview to understand like how black people interact with the world and how the world around them interacts with them, to be aware. And I think the best way to do that is to take in a lot of black centric media. So like podcasts, reading blogs, uh, the plug, me like Gray Armstrong does a lot of great work with his blog Obsidian Tea, talking about different things. So learning, and that's a black trans perspective that cover it. So there's a lot of people, a lot of individuals like you can kind of figure out through media to kind of get a sense of how to learn from possible mistakes you made in the past, but also to learn more and be able to how to be better to the black dancers around you, but also cultivate an environment that's safer for them.
So would you say like like having the representation or someone available or that would be interested in helping, let's say like community leaders develop these versus like the current leadership, like ours, for instance, is an entirely white cis board. Like,
Yeah. Oh yeah, like representation is a big deal. I think having people like things like this where you have somebody within the like Lindy Hop community, like black people within the Lindy Hop community talk about issues. I think partnering with black organizations within the city locally will be a big deal. So that way you have someone who can speak to something and then kind of also from like a more local at home way of it. So that way you just have more there's a better chance where black people feel seen and people of color will feel seen. Also, I think like if really doing that is like partnering with, I know you told me like y'all are big on learning a lot of local dance history and music history. So like partnering with probably black organizations with the same mission to figure out things in that. So that way you have an exchange, because usually if it's a black led organization, there's going to be a lot of black people and you could probably get some cross participation between both groups with
yeah.
things like that.
So we did get some questions. Valerie Plus definitely. I may be saying her last name wrong, but she
Applause.
publicly. Everyone else submitted privately via email. And like Shelby was saying, everyone asked really loaded questions, which is fantastic for this kind of conversation.
Mm-hmm.
The next one you kind of briefly hit on. It was the historical question about B. Jackson. I actually had to Google this person. I didn't know who the hell she was. But the question is, I'm a new dancer a couple months before the pandemic started. I thought the Charleston was created by a white girl named B. Jackson, and now I know it's a black dance. They wanted to know if there are any other white dancers that claimed to be the creator of black dances.
You would have to go back. I don't know any specific off the top of my head. Like, unfortunately, I wasn't able to research as well for this. So, like snowstorms, everything shut down in Texas because, like, thanks ERCOT and catching up with work. There's no one I know off the top of my head, but going back, I was talking to Amanda a little bit about this beforehand. Is if you go back through history, like especially vaudeville to minstrel tradition, a lot of minstrel performers took stuff from black dancers and then performed it on stage before even blacks even had the venues to do it. Because you had the white vaudeville circuit, then you had the black vaudeville circuit, like in many different ways. Like I think Toba, the Theater Owners Booking Association, haha, remembered that. That didn't come about till the late or early 1940s. So, yes.
City area. They were if I remember correctly, Toba was part of the Folly Theater, which is one of the circuit theaters here in Kansas City from that time frame.
Yeah, I think like the furthest out west they went was Nebraska, but they like went all the way from like the West Coast. I did write about them, like a short thing. Like, when did it start? Yeah, but like a lot of minstrel shows, you had people coming about maybe taking a dance from blacks and then kind of claiming it as their own. And a lot of time it was parody because it was not as done as skillfully as the black dancers did it. But yeah, like Toba wasn't formed until like the 1920s, and what that was a circuit of about 20 theaters that were black venues, and so in places that would allow black people on stage, because then you had like the white vaudeville circuits. There was a number of different circuits at a time. So like you had circuits that wouldn't even allow blacks on stage, and then they didn't have really their own mainstream way. So there's a ton of people I know, like answering with scatting. There's some sources I know, if you probably look at newspapers and stuff, like Al Jolson, who's a very famous blackface performer, was someone who did a lot of scatting. I think he's most known for Haunted Melody. And like, so he would probably be credited as the person who invented scatting, when it also actually came from Jelly Roll Morton cites Joe Sims from Vicksburg, Mississippi, as the creator of scat. And so, yeah, it's theater history I haven't been able to delve into as much, but like I would think like looking at pre 1900s minstrel shows, you would find a lot of white performers claiming to originate certain dances that black dancers actually originated.
And that goes actually into our next question, the scatting portion. Valerie had a question. I'd love to hear more about history and the proper use of scatting, where it came from, which you kind of already addressed, how it evolved into what we hear in most DJ swing music, and how can one understand it enough to use it?
It's always hard because like she asked this question because heard me rant many times about instructors like scatting improperly. I'll use that term, and like me, it's weird because I'll say you can't do certain things improperly, but then this is something you do improperly. Because pretty much what scatting is employing the voice to imitate instruments and certain rhythms and sounds. So like when you get real deep into music, like articulation is a thing. Articulation is how a note or a rhythm is played and the style of it. So articulation, you can have something that's very short, or something that's very short and kind of cut off and sharp, or something that's very elongated and kind of drawn out, as like two very simple versions of articulation. Jazz music use very particular sounds and rhythms that are common to that and unique to that style, that gives it its sound, that are different from like classical Baroque period orchestral music. Rock music is going to have different sounds because early jazz in the 30s, there wasn't much use of electrical instruments. And so things are going to sound differently with acoustics, and then just techniques that were used just to play the instruments and things like that, as say in the 40s, where like electrical instruments were being used more often, mostly like kind of piano and guitar. So things are going to sound different. And so long thing is, it's like jazz has particular vowel sounds that will be repeated and used. And I think a lot of times when people teach, they don't take into consideration that they're imitating specific music. And you can scat certain ways, but there's ways that are even more truer to what the music's going to sound like and you're going to hear than if you just kind of randomly put different sounds together in a rhythmic pattern.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you guys on that. Cause like when you're in a classroom, you typically hear the same style of scatting from multiple instructors that aren't even from the same regions or countries.
Yeah.
So there's definitely like a consistency in misusing it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like I think it's just like in me, I'm picky about this because I was a musician for 10 years. Like I played percussion from 5th grade all the way through high school. In middle school, I was a drummer. I've listened to jazz all my life, so I'm very familiar with the sounds, different sounds and things that will be consistent and be used. And so, and also drummers, we talk to each other because a lot of us are like, we can count this, we can just feel it out. And so we'll like kind of scatter to each other. And yeah, me, if I'm playing something written by John Philip Sousa, which is a very popular American composer who's very known for his marches, as opposed to me scatting Count Basie, they're going to sound extremely different. Very different. But a lot of times I feel people would use something, they use kind of sounds that would be similar to what you would hear in a piece from John Philip Sousa as for something that's supposed to be a stand-in for Basie or Andy Kirk or somebody. And that's something that really annoys me a lot. But I think the best way to kind of understand scatting more is just to listen to a lot more jazz music and to because as the music evolved how scatting, because Ella Fitzgerald's scatting changed over time as the music changed. Like her scatting in the 50s and stuff was very different from what her scatting was in the 30s because like the sound and everything. So
we actually do have a question that was just asked. Could we hear an example of a good and a bad scat?
Who's putting me on the spot? Is this on the Facebook Live?
This
No,
was a directed question directly to 627 from the Zoom specifically.
Oh, okay. That's why I'm not seeing it in general scat.
They want to be anonymous.
They want to be anonymous. Yeah, they're well played. Good on you, as the Aussies would say. So a typical scat I would hear a lot be like I think when people scat like 8-count rhythm, the 8-count rhythm pattern for a swing out, like shoo bop ba da ba da shoo bop ba da ba da. I don't know why that's like so into like because be shoo bop ba da shoo bop ba da. Rob me if I'm like just doing a rhythm ba 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 da ba ba da. Can y'all kind of hear the difference between it?
Yep.
So again, the first one, like I don't prefer shoo bop ba da shoo bop ba da. I'm gonna try and keep the same tempo. Bop bop ba da bop bop ba da. And I probably didn't say it because I think I've like actually kind of hit on an offbeat for the second step. But like the first one, by using the sound shoo, that's a hold of something that's going to kind of like glide, and there's a gliding feeling with it. And I'm not going to, unless I choose stylistically to slide between the steps, most people are going to try and get to step actually, so they're actually shifting their weight. So you're going to want something that's more short that will kind of reflect stepping. Like the Italian term or the music term, like will be used as staccato, where so a bop is going to be more staccato than say a shoe, which is going to be more legato, which is Italian terms that you'll use in music articulation. So so do bop ba da ba da do bop ba da ba da, which for the record, I'm putting you top notes since this is yes. When I take notes in rhythm classes, when I write rhythms to myself, I notate them because I'm a music nerd. But yeah, like I think it's like being very intentional. I mean, even when the sounds like I think Airmail Special, which is like Ella Fitzgerald, like just those that's going to be more because what's happening, and this is me getting really deep into like music nerdum. Brass instruments who are playing that, or even with a reed instrument, and someone who's played these instruments, correct me if I'm wrong, the tugging technique is going to be making contact with their mouthpiece to be able to get those short cutoff things. Because like if Ella used something with a kind of a ooh sound, she's not going to be able to do it as fast as it's done. But she also does that later in the performance. Ooh, how does scat tradition relate to modern a cappella music? It seems there's a lot of crossover.
I think they're talking kind of in like, are you referring as in like the beatboxing kind of thought process, Alex?
My first process when I thought like the modern context of scatting and like old like a cappella, I'm thinking Boys to Men. I'm a 90s kid. I'm a 90s black kid. Like I grew up listening to Boys to Men in the early 90s. Greatest R&B group of all time. I'll die on that hill. Yes, there's a like, and here's the thing. I don't think I said it, but I think the tradition. I think how like people formed a question that like, oh, Lindy Hop in vernacular jazz was a black dance. It's still a black dance. It's still an aspect of the black dance tradition. Though the Lindy Hop community is predominantly white, it's still a black dance, and it still comes from black culture, and that culture is still a living tradition. So kind of scatting, yes, like a good through probably culture, and scatting and a lot of stuff kind of veers off into branches. I think scatting is something that easily could have gone to beatboxing when hip hop came about, and hip hop became more of a thing in the late 70s and early 80s. And then that just kind of continued on where it kind of stayed where people visiting, because like a lot of people use music and dance as just everyday entertainment, and it was saying it was like back to life. So I'm sure it was just something that was done because, you know, um, economic inequality, they couldn't afford instruments and things like that. So if they're not hitting on instruments and people were talented enough to do that, they would make sounds to keep beats for each other and things like that. Because I mean, it's crazy. Like pastimes like beatboxing and freestyle was something I did with a lot of kids when I visit my cousins growing up in Georgia. Like we would just like someone would drop a beat and people would just rap over it. I was a terrible rapper, so I beatboxed. So and figured it out. So yeah, there's a tradition that carries through.
So we actually have another question, and we had someone else send in a very similar question.
I'm not beatboxing.
Latin jazz, how does it fit in? And then someone else, Marion, is asking a very similar question. How do Latin dances and music come into play? Is the approach to their history different to American Black music?
I haven't gotten into that too much, like with Latin music, because like at the same time as things I do see, like I think in the 1940s, during like while swing music was still a big deal, there's a surgence of mambo music. And the funny thing is the reason, if anybody's followed me on Facebook for the past, good gosh, how long has this gag been going on? I think since 2018, I have friends who tried to trap me into listening to Lou Bega's Mambo Number 5. Because of this has gone on for 3 bloody years. I've actually looked into the music, like with that, like who wrote, because I love Xavier Cugat, but he wasn't the originator. He was somebody else who Perez Prado. He was the original person who composed Mambo Number 5, and he was huge. I think him and Xavier Cugat were, from what I know, they were like the two giants of mambo, like when it comes to like big orchestra like arrangements. So like when you had like kind of like how we would put it probably for mainstream aspect, Duke and Basie when it comes to swing. You have Perez and Xavier when it comes to mambo, and what I'm learning. And so I think with it, and this is one of the reasons why I say Black American tradition, because you have Black Puerto Ricans who come from like who contribute to Latin dance, Haitians contribute to like Latin dance and things, and they have their own dance tradition with things. Also, there's a lot of African dance that kind of, like if you ever look at Kazumba, that has a lot of aspects where you could take straight from African dance forms, but then also kind of fit like Latin, like Afro-Cuban dance forms into it as well. And so it's not much, it's like kind of like a separate thing, like how the Latin dances kind of came out and Latin music did that. But like as swing music was big, mambo music was big, I think, along with the dance and those styles. So that's something I haven't looked at totally, but there's different like rhythmic characteristics that are shared between jazz and Latin music, but aren't exactly the same. Like Latin syncopate, it doesn't syncopate as extreme as some swing music does, but it still allows for the dancing. Like because like clave rhythm, which is the basis of Latin music, comes from what a lot of people calls like African bell pattern, which has come big in a lot of African music, in which that's like the basis of syncopation is like African bell pattern. Usually a lot of stuff comes back to that, as like a lot of African music, when instruments were used, like you have not only drums keeping rhythms, but you also have like the sequences on like an African bell that was kind of hit like depending on the tribes, some particular tribes. And I think that was just able to be maintained, and depending where people were in the country during slavery, they were able to maintain that. And so that probably came off to its own thing, just depending on the Caribbean islands and different things and a cross pollination of cultures.
That's interesting because it's similar to like what I was listening to a podcast through NPR about maybe 2 years ago on the ferry boats between New Orleans and Cuba when it back in the 40s and 50s, and like Bono music and New Orleans style jazz are super similar because of those.
Yeah, you have that cross cultural, and depending like where people went, because I think like there's a statement among like Black academics and Black scholars talking about like the reason why I try to say Black American culture and things like that. There's not much of a difference between Black American culture and like Haitian and Puerto Rican and stuff. It's like, yeah, it's not that they're not a part of the culture; they were just dropped off first, dropped off being slave ships and them, because a lot of port cities were there, and then they would learn particular languages to be able to, like Haitian slaves were forced to learn French and things like that, and then be able to serve people who were in New Orleans. And like going back to Charleston, like if you look at Charleston, like Charleston has a lot of Gullah influence, like the Gullah culture from Africa, and the Geechee people. So they had a lot of slaves who were from that tribe who stayed together and were able to maintain. And I think um, Lion Smith. I'm like trying to. Willie Lion Smith points out, I think in Jazz Dance or in Stepping on the Blues, I think it's Stepping on the Blues, like when Charleston became a thing, he's like, wait, that's not Charleston. That's the Geechee dance. And Geechee is referring to the Gullah people that could actually know as the Geechee people. And they developed that dance like in the pre 1900s, like on plantations in Charleston, South Carolina. Which so there's a lot of cultural exchange there from things that happen.
Question was from Stephanie was clarification: Charleston the dance or Charleston the both?
Yeah, both.
Albuquerque Downs is opening on Saturday. Oh. Holy crap! Everybody's
okay. I think someone just had their mic and was talking in the background. They have been muted. I apologize if you actually had a question, but please make sure you guys keep yourselves muted. And if you have questions, put them in the chat, all right? Okay, so going on that, someone else, we accidentally skipped over their question, but earlier someone had asked to maybe hear some music that had some scatting in it, and like if they could hear the difference that way as well.
Ooh, I have music. Am I able to share my sound?
Hold on, I think I gotta make you host again. 1 sec.
That's true.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say Airmail Special is, I mean, that's a known one. Me being the hipster I am, I have to think of a song that isn't a very well-known one. Oh, Just a Crazy Song by Blanche Calloway and her Joy Boys.
Ah.
I'm a hipster. Blanche Calloway was better than Cab.
What was the Blanche Calloway song? I'm putting it in the chat for everyone.
Just a Crazy Song. I love Blanche Calloway's too, Gary. I think who introduced, like, I just literally like randomly stumbled upon her while researching something else. And I'm like, wait a second, Cab had a sister? Wait, her music's lit. How come more people don't play this?
There was a lot of that. It's like, I was doing a Kansas City jazz DJ night, and I stumbled across someone that had a sister here, Julia. So Julia Lee, I stumbled upon her big brother's big band, and then so vice flipped, but equally just as good.
Yeah, it's like I think like because you think about it, just like the stuff because I learned that while doing something like talking about like underrated jazz figures, like Fletcher Henderson's brother was an arranger and had his own orchestra, and a lot of stuff that's credited to Fletcher Henderson or Don Redman, his brother, wrote. So a lot of stuff. So it's like, and he actually has a piece that actually has the same riff. That's also a similar riff to "In the Mood." So, which that was probably influenced by Tire Paper Stomp and.
Okay. Let's
see. A question in the chat. I am watching that chat. Where do you think the Lindy and swing communities be in the U.S. in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years in the world? Oh my gosh. Hopefully still around.
I mean, it did disappear for a little bit, but not entirely, though. There were still pockets that lived through the supposed supposed revival, right? I mean, there's the entire talk of another group today was doing the talk on with some Mary Lou Parker and what was the other group? Some
old. What they do the Parkettes? Like that was a discussion. Like they were talking with them. Yeah, it's I think the scene will still be around in a year. Hopefully, like we'll be able to dance in person in like North America and Europe more places as like hopefully a global vaccination plan starts getting kind of rolled out. Hopefully, in 5 years, I think when the scene comes back, I think it's going to look very differently. I don't think we'll have as many big events because just the financial ability of just being able to put on events and people still recovering financially from the pandemic. 10 years, hopefully I'll still be dancing, maybe, or still be connected with the scene in some way, shape, or form. I'll probably move on by that point, honestly, because like it's been hard to kind of be like and being in a dance in 15 years, like 5 years from now. I think it will probably recover, hopefully, from the pandemic, but still kind of have a more solidified place. I mean, I'm just hoping like if as much as I stay involved with the community, I will hope they will try and do more to kind of incorporate Black dance values into teaching, but also you get to hear more voices and more instructors who aren't just white, but instructors who are Black, instructors who are Hispanic, trans, like because there's been so many people, like so many people in history who contributed to the American dance tradition, and even within just Black dance tradition, a lot of LGBTQ people, like Josephine Baker was queer, yep. like Ma Rainey was, like she's like so many people. So it's just I think just being able to have more voices talk about a dance and people be able to talk about like how they interact with it and be able to convey that to students and to communities is what I would hope. And I think it's just like we'll just be able to have a community where the dance is thriving, but the dance is still a creative outlet. We're not pushed toward the very homogenized style, which is be very difficult with internet and the fact that you have just certain people are going to become rock stars and their videos are going to be circulated and they're going to teach a lot. So
that's kind of the environment we're already in with YouTube being a thing.
Derek, I hope that answered your question. And it's good to see you. Nice to see you here.
Okay, so back over here. So going along this music and bringing modernity into it, we have a question from Mark. What/is there a line when Black culture is being appropriated by white modern jazz bands / musicians?
That's messy. That I think it's hard with that because like it's hard because I want to support bands, and my stance with music has been very, very, very like weird because me is like I want to support bands, I want to support musicians, like support musicians. There's a lot of great musicians. I don't play as many modern musicians because I get afraid when I hear new DJs who just DJ modern musician after modern musician. I try to continuously DJ classic ones. Now I do have like modern favorites because I try to stay with musicians and band leaders of color, but and it's hard because I'm someone who wants to hear modern bands either take a risk in change an interpretation of a very classic standard or compose their own music. But at the same time, it's got to slap. There's some things I think a lot of bands do when I hear them live, they have the feel and the sound, which is why I'd be a huge proponent of more live albums. Mm-hmm. Speaking of like Gordon Owl's like Louis Armstrong tribute like album from like Lindy Focus 2019, top shelf. Like that has the feel of it. But a lot of stuff when they produce in the studio just doesn't sound right, and I have no desire to listen to it or any desire to play it. I love those bands, and it's like breaks my heart when that happens. But as I say, when they're appropriating, I think it's hard because I think to know that, I think you would have to talk to musicians offhand, because a lot of musicians that play the Lindy Hop events, they know the music history pretty well, and they know the people pretty well, and they know it really well, and like you can tell like they put a lot of love and heart. Because it's funny because I like nerd out with some musicians that I know what artists influenced their style as I listen to more stuff, and so but I think it's appropriative. I think if they continually only imitate and try to transcribe like how things were played note for note rather than have their own take on it. I think that's when stuff gets weird for me. But also it gets weird when a band sounds like a Glenn Miller orchestra, and I'm like, why? Like there's so many people you could like imitate, but why Glenn Miller? Like at least do Artie Shaw. Like
good early stuff. Granted, that's never the stuff we actually hear.
No. No, I like if people ask me to play Glenn Miller and I play Jeep Jockey Jump and they get upset because I didn't play In the Mood. I'm like, look, I hate that song. I'm sorry. Like,
so we have another question from Mark. Do you have any good resources, rules of thumb determining if a song is racist and or problematic?
This is interesting because we got into a big flummox on swing DJs with lyrical interpretation. Understand your language. Understand the language. I think we had a mix up. Nala Kim has a good resource I'm going to drop in the chat for like problematic songs. And some songs, it's blatant, like they have a thing in a title where it's like, that's racist as F, and a lyric where that's racist as F. I think a lot of times, if you're not sure, don't play it and research. It also asks probably other musicians like what they think, because you can find out what certain terms and certain words mean by Googling it. And yeah, like me, I wouldn't play anything with blatantly racist stuff or that talks about unsavory topics. But I think like Nala Kim has done a good job. Like
I've got Chinatown in there. There's a couple of songs. There's one song in there I'm not sure I completely agree with, Strange Fruit specifically, because it's more of like a protest song versus a blatant.
It's a protest song, but I think what it is that's agreed upon is black people don't want to hear a song that's talking about lynching.
That's true. That's fair. Okay, we actually have another question in here too. Any recommendations on teaching or handling white students that are uncomfortable with hearing the history of the dance? Ooh.
Like verbally? Like, do they like express it verbally?
That is. This question is from Nicole Walters. It's a loaded question because there's actually more to it.
Because me, it's like I've had people like, I mean, I wear a hoodie when I teach classes, and I know I'm going to have a lot of white people in class, which is probably every time I teach. I wear a hoodie that says I love my blackness and I love yours, because it's like we're going to talk about racist stuff. Like I talk about racism, and I'll talk about race in history in all my classes. Like teaching the Shim Sham, I talked about the two Negro rule, like how you always had to have two black people on stage, and that's why things were. And I say things and it makes students visibly uncomfortable. And I haven't had anyone verbally object to something. if I did, they'd be welcome to walk out of the class because that's how I'm going to teach. I'm going to talk about these things. If that's uncomfortable for them, like you, they have all their right to remove themselves from class, and it's not going to bother me none. We're in PA, open carry state. Ugh, yeah. I grew up in Ohio, so I know that feel. Um, for me, it's like I see people who are like very visibly uncomfortable. Like we haven't had anybody come with a firearm, like in Texas.
I think so too. Like, because we're in an open carry state. As a business, you should be able to, just like a no shoes, no shirts rule. Like,
yeah,
our company doesn't want guns on the premises. You can't come in with it.
Yeah.
There's definitely more to this question. I'd like to know how to engage and change their discomfort and perspective, but not at the cost of the students and teachers of color. Basically, how far do I extend the olive branch, or is it problematic to teach others who won't value the cultural origin of the dance?
My biggest thing to deal with things like that and to deal with white people's discomfort, consistency. Like I think the first time I mentioned, because I have a spiel, like my spiel when I teach drop-ins is like, I was like, oh, this is African American. I'm like, how many y'all taking ballroom dance? People raised a hand. I'm like, okay, well, what are you learning in ballroom classes is not going to be applied here. This is Lindy Hop. It's like, this is African American dance. This is an African American dance that came up in the 1920s in New York and Harlem. The aspects I'll be talking to will be along Afrocentric values and social norms. The dance was appropriated in like about the 1930s, 1940s by Arthur Murray to be simplified to be consumed by a more massive white public, which he deemed like the dance had to be tamed to allow whites to learn. I will say things like that, like in classes. A lot of people I've gotten to the wide-eyed and kind of look back like, oh my God, he said that. But I teach frequently enough where I continue saying these things, people understand, okay, that's what he does. And I do it with conviction. I don't make a big deal about it. It's just something that I do. It's something how I choose to teach. Yeah, if people are uncomfortable with it, they have their right to leave. Like, I think if that's the thing, it's like be consistent and have conviction with what you do. I think if you can't force people to value something, if they don't want to value it, and it's fine if they want to leave, because I don't want to keep somebody who doesn't value something that's a core aspect to me in a community, because then they're not going to be a fun community member. And so, like, it's better that we just don't have them around than to try and accommodate them and then accommodate two clashing viewpoints.
I feel like now's a good time too to actually really instill those kind of values, because without any dancing actually happening in the Lindy Hop community, like, it's a good time frame to actually rebuild in that capacity on the back end of stuff. That way, when things do reopen, you already have the foundation to be like, this is who and what we are, and we're going to be consistent with it.
Yeah, it's consistency. Like, I think I was talking about, like, because I'm thinking somewhat like the question how to go forward with things. It's consistency and conviction is the simple thing. Like, if you want to include like including the cultural roots of the dance and historical roots of the dance, it's got to be a consistent action that you do passionately. And the people who will buy into it, like, a lot of students just are very neutral to it. Like, when I've talked about a lot of Black history stuff, they're just neutral to it. And I think over time, to either, well, okay, cool, he's going to the spiel. Thank goodness. I'm trying to catch my breath because we just ran to Big Apple twice. And so, or there's going to be students who are going to be hanging on every word of it who are really interested to buy it. And that's fine. So it's like, I think it's just something when it's like you have to do it enough where it's pretty much becomes a brand. And it's a brand for me because I was teaching fairly frequently, like, lessons in Dallas. So for people, it was very much expected when I taught that there's going to be a history lesson, and people know I have a goal where I'm going to like, oh, here's how racism impacted jazz dance and jazz history. So,
we have our next.
Ooh, Derek had a good one.
Yep.
What type of Black American cultural values do you think the current Lindy Hop community scene needs or could use to make events more equitable? All of them. By that, in Stepping on the Blues, there's Jackie Malone, which is one of my favorite books.
I'm gonna put that in the.
Talks about Black American like aesthetic values, which is I need to pull up a paper that I wrote to remember this because I don't have this memorized off the top of my head. Give me 1 second. I literally have like my entire like Google Drive open so I can just search stuff and just pull it up. Okay, yeah. So like characteristics that she cites is rhythm, improvisation, control, angularity, asymmetry, and dynamism. There's more things where protest is included in some literature, academic literature, as a Black dance value, which it is. I'm going to pull up something I got from Ujima Blues. Black vernacular dance aesthetic. Where is it? Yeah, I got. I can pull my I can just copy and paste it from.
I'm moving it over now into the Facebook chat.
Yep, and so, and I can't find. I'm not finding my other one. I think it's in my shared, but there's a number of values that are that if you go across like academia, it's a ton of them. Why do I not have that? Because I want to try and hit on most of them because there's so many that I think there we go. And I'm going to take a big old screenshot of this because I don't think I'll be able to share it. So, no, don't do that. Yeah, and also other places is like it's going to be complex rhythm, a part play, individuality, aesthetic of cool, dance of derision, ephebism, and high effect juxtaposition, which a lot of bigger words to that say a lot of the same things. Like there's going to be angles in the body. There's going to be things that kind of poke fun at mainstream culture. There's going to be things where it's going to be like kind of a childlike enthusiasm that that will be very like apparent, not only just jazz dance, but Black vernacular dance forms in general. And so I don't think I can.
This actually goes right into our next question too. What are some resources or books you'd recommend on swing dancing and swing music from a Black narrative?
On swing dancing, like Frankie and Norma's biographies. I think I'll touch on Derek's question. I don't think I like fully answered it. Is at least with the characteristics spelled out in Stepping on the Blues. I think a lot of dance events don't really capitalize. I think like community participation, which is another aspect of Black dance, is being loud. I think performances there's people are too quiet. Competitions, people are too quiet. A lot of the dance form, a lot of the aspects that you will see in Black dance forms aren't present really in much of the teaching of Lindy Hop. In a few classes that I take. I get bored in classes a lot of times, so I don't really take very many of them. But there are instructors who I feel do a good job of things that I will take classes from. And so I think like all the aspects of not just Black dance values, but also Black social norms, I think need to kind of be taken into a point. And I think the best way to kind of learn those is not just reading, but also to spend time in Black cultural spaces for things. Someone had a good question of the line of appreciation and appropriation. Give me 1 second as I need to find. There he is. For resources, I'm going to drop a link to my Patreon to one of my articles where I actually wrote about, I think, just about all the books that I've read to date. To have the only book that's not written from a Black perspective, well, two of them aren't. Frankie's book was written based off interviews with Frankie, so you don't really get like Frankie's thoughts on a bunch of things. He's more answering questions, and the autobiography was kind of constructed in that way. Norma Miller's autobiography is more of her voice in it. Jazz Dance is an interesting book because Marshall Stern has a lot of great quotes talking about dance and covering little cultural tidbits with people throughout that. And my biggest favorite is Stepping on the Blues because it covers just social norms, dance norms, cultural norms within from African tribes and communities and African like culture to African American communities. Jukin, not really from a Black perspective, but does a good job of covering Black social dynamics of cultural spaces to talk about different things. Like, and she does it from going from slave plantations to Black parties in the 60s, essentially. So she spends a lot of times in Jukin. So I'm dropping that.
Got some new questions in here from Marianne. What is the line of appreciation and appropriation for other minorities learning Lindy Hop or other Black American dance forms?
And the answer to that question is going to change depending on the person, because I think different people have different different interpretations. Me, I think for somebody, I think the line for appreciation, one, I think either or. I think you have to know the history of it and understand like the background, at least on a very low level. If you're going to be someone who teaches, I think you need to have a very good grasp of the history and cultural influences on the dance, because I don't want to learn stuff, especially now that it's more of a norm for the Lindy Hop community is trying to push. Is like I don't want to see like instructors teaching workshops that are like on beginner level, but not reference something coming from some person in a film clip. I'm not saying everyone has to reteach film stuff, but I think some people have to refer to how moves and things come about in a social setting, culturally relevant to the dance, or something connected to the culture in some way. Because me, it's like doesn't even have to be jazz dance. Like I'm going to be doing things. I take influence from rap music when it comes to my jazz dance, like rhythmically. I take influence from. I've been following a lot of stuff with Charlie Atkins. Charlie Atkins was a tap dancer. He was part of the duo Coles and Atkins. They came around about the 40s, but then they both became dance teachers. Charlie Atkins was a longtime choreographer for Motown Records. He wasn't credited because Motown wanted to present that all the groups did their own choreography to make them more around it. But behind the scenes, he choreographed for like Gladys Knight and the Pips, from what I know, some with the Four Tops, and most notably the Temptations. So I watch videos of those groups and take things from them. But if I ever teach it in the class, I'll be able to reference this is the influence of this and these and how this kind of manifests in the social environment or the pop culture, among the pop culture that this dance arrives from. So I think it's just like being able to point to how it connects to the roots of the dance to begin with, rather than just, oh, this is Charleston, Norma Miller, because I think what a lot of instructors do, bless their hearts, and me doing the common Texan and Southern thing where I'm going to insult people and then say bless their hearts. But it's like they're trying their best, where they can mention Frankie and Norma in a class, but it has really no ties to the material that they're talking about. It's like okay, that's fine, I guess. But I think it's just being able to have some kind of through line connection with the culture that it comes from. And so I think if you're not doing that, you're appropriating it for social status and monetary gain. And no, I think that just needs to not be done. Also, not using a routine verbatim for a competition. I don't see that happen anymore, but there was a lot of people doing that at ILHC in like the early, like around 2010, 2011. A lot of people were doing it, and like it wasn't yeah, it wasn't a controversy, but I think I remember like talking to another instructor. I'm like, wow, did people do this? And like people like, well, yeah, the judges should know, but it didn't really get punted. But I'm like, yeah, you can't just rip a film clip and then just put that in your performance. It's like that's terrible.
Natalie has a question. What would be some examples of Black cultural norms that the swing community often misses?
Complimenting someone's outfit always being a pass sexually.
Oh.
Yeah. And just go on to kind of like my safe spaces things to understand. Like, I think being aware, and once again, I'm going to shout out Obsidian T many times because Gray Armstrong does great work of writing about the difference between white and Black culture, and he's written about this about flirting, but sometimes also stuff is just like Black people verbally praise each other, whether we know you, whether we don't know you. If we like your shoes, we're gonna tell you we like your shoes. If you like hair, we're gonna tell you like hair. If you have a fly outfit, we're gonna have a fly. I've asked people, like I've done that, and I think I've made some women visibly uncomfortable by just complimenting them on things, which is like understandable, like because catcalling's a thing, and that's something like it's something else. So it's like, but I think it's something. I think that's just cultural norms is something that's different. It's compliments is more verbal compliments is just something you'll see in not just Black spaces, but I know my friend Lizzie, who dances kizomba, who dances a lot of urban ballroom dances, so modern Black partner dances. And she talks about like people compliment shoes and things like that. I think being more honest and open. Like I told students, I think students, it should be a cultural norm where you can walk away from a dance if something's uncomfortable. If you're uncomfortable, I think that's something you can do. Like, yes, I understand reporting stuff to safe spaces, but I think it just needs to be a cultural norm. If a dancer does something you don't like, lead or follow, you can just walk away.
Yep.
It's like, and so now I do tell a lot of like dancers, like if something happens, the person has issues, come to me. I'll stick up for you. Like every time I try to do that. Audience participation, like yelling during performances and things like that, and just being absolute like just going ham. I think it's something like that because there's times where I yell at competitions and people give me kind of a snide look, and I'm like, that's your problem. It's like
you would think that would be more of a cultural aspect of Lindy Hop, like it is in like hip hop communities, but it's really not, and I don't know why or when, because when I first started dancing about a decade ago, like people were a lot more rowdy and encouraging during like competitions, and that's
the weird part because freaking the differences between ILHC in 2015 and ILHC in 2019 is baffling. Like literally ILHC 2013, what made me really want to go. Mm-hmm. It's just like because like the atmosphere out of 2015 was crazy. Like people yelling and stuff. In 2019, I felt like I was at a PGA golf tournament sometime, and I'm like, okay, but I think it's people that don't come up in the environment. It's not really cultivated. Mm-hmm. I think it's one of those things that's got to be cultivated from people from the top and top down. I mean, honestly, I would rather have people just yell and applaud for things they like rather than clap on the 2 and 4s the entire time while doing a performance. Like, yeah.
Okay.
Alex O'Dear, if clothing compliments in white culture are sexual, then I've been hit on a lot more than I thought. And this comes to the thing I think like with um gender and pardon my heteronormativity with my example, but yes, if it's like it's gonna be, usually if a man compliments a woman on clothing, it's gonna come off as a sexual pass most often than not. And yes, it's vice versa the other way around. Woman complimenting a man is gonna come off, um, but yeah, it's something because I mean I've had it happen. I think where people have been reported to safe spaces and extreme action was taken against black dancers that I know because they were being friendly in what they did and their culture was friendly, and then there wasn't a the the proper due diligence wasn't done to clear the mishap up.
There was
and it's like
investigation or like talking to other parties that were
there wasn't something, and a person and a friend of mine got banished from a thing off something that was a miscommunication that could have been handled differently because it handled much differently, which is why like I think it's like when it comes to representation, it's just having, if not black people from the community, talking to experts in a field who would be able to help guide safe space policies to keep that from happening, to have something where the person who's reporting feels respected and feels valued, but something's but due diligence is done so everyone feels valued in a situation. Now, the person that comes out with an investigation done, the person did something harmful that's being reported, screw them, get them out. Like, but at the same time, people still have their thing, have their right to have their actions be judged properly rather than have an action taken too quickly.
Yeah.
Derek says, yep, sometimes if you don't compliment a woman in African American and Caribbean culture, especially some of the elders, it can be seen as cold, especially. Lord, Derek, how come you didn't say hi to your auntie? How are your grandma? Oh God, I got chewed out for not like saying hi to certain elders. You know, that's a funny, and that's the thing in Southeast Asian culture, I believe as well. I have friends like communicated like if you don't say hello to all and like hello and compliment all the elders in a room, like you're gonna get chewed out. And by chewed out, I mean cussed out. But yeah, but I think like greeting, and I think that's a simple one actually. Like Derek brings up, it's just greeting people.
Mm-hmm.
It's just greeting people. Like I've been in white church settings, and like sometimes in the Lindy Hop community where like no one says hi, like hi, and that. But you go to a black church, you go to a like black church or predominantly black church, you're gonna have so many people say hi to you from the parking lot until you get to your seat in the pew. Like black dance, social settings are like that too, where someone's at least gonna like give a nod to you, like, hey, how you doing? Like talk to you. In at least some cases, it's hard to be awkward and shy in a black setting, but then usually in white settings for me, it's like I've been able to kind of just like hide away from people.
Yeah. There is a question regarding exactly this from Natalie. As a white girl, I worry about being appropriating when branching out in the vocal interaction with what's happening in the room, yelling, etc. That energy is so fun, though, and I'd like to figure out how to cultivate it, especially at dances where it's 99% white group. And he tips or cautions on how to branch out respectfully.
Being more vocally like what's the word I'm looking for? Appreciative. I think the best way is to do it in classes.
Mm-hmm.
Like I always communicate it with my students. Like usually I'll like verbally like will react when I see things, and that's why I try to have classes where the people dance a lot so I can watch them and encourage them. I do it at social dances as well. Now I have a friend who hates it when I do it because then he starts messing up when I compliment him. So then I'll shout an insult, and then like you have the dancers who don't know me who's like, "Wow, this guy's an effing asshole! Like, what's wrong with him?" I'm like, "Look, did you not hear me compliment him before I insulted his dancing?" Like, But yeah, I think it's just like, I think to cultivate it, you have to live it. And everything in, unlike actual economics that don't trickle down, if you have like cultural norms, if the people at the top of the social hierarchy establish something as a norm, it will trickle down to other people. So, bye, Christy J.
Okay, we have a good one here. So the idea of the white dancer in here to dance and have fun. I've always believed that to participate in Lindy Hop or any other Black dance as a white dancer, I should be actively giving back and not just taking. How do I communicate to my local dance community the importance of the stories and history of what we participate in, and not just I'm here to have fun? I'll be honest, that's an issue in our city.
I think, and it comes back to like what I talked about, like the short, loaded question, but my answer is very short. It's conviction and consistency. So, like, if you have people who are like, I just want to have fun and dance, but they don't actively disrupt the talking about these things, don't worry about them. Like, either they're going to keep showing up or eventually they're going to leave. Now, you will have the people who will take on this stuff and run with it and be very big about it, but it's like you can't force everyone to be passionate about something you're passionate about. There will be people where this is not as big of a super big deal for me to like have me stop showing up, but I'm still going to hang out. But if you have enough people buy in and kind of like buy into that cultural aspect and continue to keep it alive and keep it going, it will become a norm. And yeah, you'll have some people who won't participate in it, but they won't disrupt it either. So I think it's just kind of keep pushing forward if no one's actively, and only really react to someone if they're actively trying to disrupt it. Like if people like, they're like, I just want to come here and have fun. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Mm-hmm. Like, but I just want to do this thing. This is fun for me. Which that's usually my snide remark to reporters, like, oh, this is fun for me. Like, talk about the history and stuff. I love talking about it and to people. So I think it's just like staying consistent with it and still doing it, regardless if people have no reaction to it. I would only worry about it if they have like a reaction to disrupt it.
We have another question here too. How can we improve the social aspect for Black dancers?
Dance with them and dance with Black women and Black femme presenting, because no one dances those people. Like, it's true. Greet them, talk to them. Like, and also, I think the thing is to not isolate it, is to make the social norm of greeting everyone and talking to everyone an actual norm within your community. And it's hard to overlook people when you're actively talking and greeting everyone and making things feel safer. Because honestly, if you go from Black social circles to typical white ones that are very kind of standoffish, it's very hard to really stay engaged if no one's really engaging with you and like taking interest in you. So that's the thing. It's like really just make it a norm to greet and acknowledge everyone and continue doing that too. When you greet and acknowledge those people, you'll make it safer while also talking about the roots of the dance and also having representation. So having like if you don't have like any people who contribute to the scene, like have something every now and again where you have like a Black artist or a Black DJ kind of participate in something. So there's that visibility. They can feel more included, because there's a lot of qualified Black DJs, there's a lot of qualified Black instructors in the scene to include. So
how would you, just because our scene is mostly like, I think it was Natalie, who's also pretty much 99% white. Mm-hmm. Would you like, how would you suggest actually reaching out to other communities within your own city that have the same values?
I think just be honest and straightforward with what we're trying to do. Like, look, we're trying to incorporate more Black history and culture in things, and also hopefully create a space where that would be inclusive to more Black people. We would like to partner with y'all just to pick up on either like more historical things and things like that, and also possibly see if we can just be an attractive venue for Black people. I think honestly, if you're like full-fledged like communicating that, because that's what y'all are wanting, you communicate with that with another community or a Black dance org, something like that. I think they'll be like either be like no, or they'll be like, oh yeah, sounds cool, willing to work with y'all. So I think it's just being that, because I think a lot of organizations, they just get uncomfortable with that, and I'm like, look, if you try and paint it any other way, the Black people are going to determine that's what you're trying to do anyway. Like, we're just going to figure it out. So might as well, like, more likely we'll be like, oh, they want to try and like learn more about history and stuff and partner with us to try and be able to have more Black people in their community. Okay, clear goal. Then they're able to choose whether they want to work with you or not.
We have about 3 minutes left, Shelby. Is there anything you want to hit up specifically? Because we do have a couple more questions that were sent in.
Let's finish the questions. Give me one quick second. I need to switch over to my wired earbuds because these are running out of battery.
All right, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good, because I've done that during sessions before and it screwed up the entire show. I know there's another good question that was sent in that we probably haven't touched on yet. Favorite Kansas City musician? I haven't answered that one yet.
No, we haven't touched that at all. I know you and I have specifically talked about that before, but
yes. My favorite Kansas City musician is Coleman Hawkins. He was born in St. Joseph, Missouri, and when he first became an artist, I think he played for Benny Moten, I think, for a very short period of time.
Yeah, very early on in the
Moten. Yeah, because there was another band he played for, and I can't remember off the top of my head. It was something in their Jazz Hounds, which I think is such a cool name. Like I'm a simp for Coleman Hawkins. I'm just gonna be real. Yeah, he played with Mamie Smith and her Jazz Hounds for the first gig, but then he did end up going to Kansas City and he played with Benny Moten for a very short period of time. So he is my favorite Kansas City jazz musician.
Okay, we probably just have time for one more of these questions, Shelby. Let's do. So many of these questions are very similar, so I'm like having to read through them.
Because I feel like I try to capture as many of them in one setting. Yeah, I think, that's something I touched on, I think, to I think the issues with safe spaces and code of conduct, I think it's imperative that people learn what makes Black people feel unsafe in white environments and why and what they're concerned about. I think if any of y'all are in the group Lindy Hoppers Against Rape Culture, that's mostly what I post on, is those kind of issues in the context to mainly how they affect Black men. Eventually, I'll get back to posting. It's like in trans women, like Black trans women, like how they're affected, because pretty much how safe spaces and codes of context are formulated is just to protect white cis women. And it's not a product, but to know that there are issues and things that make Black spaces unsafe. And I think to be able to write the codes of conduct properly, um, I think it's just to have people who are able to take in media or just talk to people who would be able to weigh in on those things. Because there's a lot of historical weight to things like that. Also, just uh, lot of media, like a lot of podcasts. I know one that comes to mind, Truth's Table, is a Christian podcast, but it's 3 Black women. And I think it's the series. They talk about multi-ethnic churches, and they talk about a lot of things that happen to them in white church environments that make them uncomfortable. Pass the Mic is another Black Christian one that kind of talks about navigating white spaces. But there's a lot of like articles and things about that. That once again, Gray Armstrong covers in Obsidian T, but I think it's just being able to try to get an ear into conversations of what it is and try to come up with addressing those issues. There's forums like Blackness, Whiteness, and Blues that is an open forum to kind of talk about those kind of issues and things like that. I'm not sure how many Black dancers are in Lindy Hop Against Rape Culture, but I think if the questions are asked in open public forums, the people who are willing to give the information on how to do that would be able to cover those things much like more in depth than I do. Because me, I kind of like, oh, I'll see an article. I'm like, oh, that's a thing that organizers should know about, the put in safe space policies, and I post about it.
I know locally we have a place called, or a group called Surge, that specifically actually works with Black organizations and safety spaces and policies. And I'm sure most other cities probably have similar orgs.
Mm-hmm.
And they would be good people to speak with personally about this kind of stuff and how to make that safer for people of color.
Yeah. Ooh, John asked a good one. How can we protect a victim and their anonymity and still do our due diligence to ensure it isn't a racial issue? My gut reaction is to say you can't, to ensure it's not a racial issue. Like, are you talking about like in kind of a mistaken case, or either or? Regardless, like it's probably the race is probably going to come out, and then depending like how, yeah, everyone's going to know who is who and everything like that, or who one party, if it's like, so like, yeah, sometimes in situations, yeah, and that's one of those messy things where it's like, I think talking to an organization, someone who's done more study with those kind of issues than I have, or it's like a Surge or something like that. So I wish I had an answer. I'm sure there's people who are much smarter and more qualified than I am to answer that question, John. But it's something, yeah, it is something to think about very much.
I think the only thing I can think of is like just not being super reactive, which was kind of touched earlier on a similar topic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think the difference is, I know one of my friends who talked about who does a lot of like urban ballroom and he does swing dance events. They talk about how literally it's more common in more non-white spaces for certain interactions that wouldn't be, that'll be a safety issue, but it's not something where you have to get administration involved. Your moves are like it's more likely to take care of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Like take care of it and you will handle the issue rather than getting things involved. So smaller things. So some issues that would be kind of handled at a much smaller level in a Black social setting, but it'll be kind of seen more bigger in like our Lindy Hop ones. It's going to be like a hard to kind of how to manage that particular thing. Because I mean, I've had that with like certain issues where people are like, oh, you want to go to safe spaces? I'm like, no, I can handle this. And it's like, I'll handle this and I'll talk to the person myself. Like they know what they did. I know what they did. And the people that matter in my life know what happened. So yeah, so.
All right, Shelby, we're actually out of time. This was really good. I feel like this was something I've been personally wanting to do, which is why we did it in the first place. But it's also just super important for the swing dance community to actually give a shit.
Yay, Valerie's here. Hi, Val. I'm sure your cat's with you.
But thank you so much. We really appreciate your time. And hopefully we can do this again.
My pleasure. Yes, if we could do this again. Yeah. Get more black voices than mine. Like I said, Kenneth Ship does a series every now and again on Sundays called Talk to Me, where he kind of goes in depth to a lot of issues and things like that among the black community. And so that's something I will definitely try and keep an eye out on. He's a dear friend, and that's somebody I would recommend. And also, yeah, so thank you all for coming.
Thanks, Shelby.